Hey booktube, my name is the Book Mage, welcome back to my channel, and to my favourite time of the year. It is Halloween, it is spooky season, and it is all about the vampires this year, at least for me. So I have known for a while that my entire October TBR is just going to be like one big vampire extravaganza. So basically for the entire month of October I'm just going to be reading about vampires. I'm going to watch like some vampire movies, TV shows, maybe even read some vampire manga. Everything is going to be vampire vibes, which is why I've got this lovely red lighting, which I'm going to turn off because it's messing up my white balance. The real horror is me having to edit this video. So what you are joining me for in this video is a Halloween spooky time vampire based reading vlog in which I'm just going to be attempting to like live my best spooky vampire life and, I don't know, enjoy the season, enjoy autumn, and read a lot of vampire books, most importantly. So if you feel like joining me for like vampire vibes and spooky times and autumnal leaves and like just chill autumnal Halloween goth aesthetic, then definitely join me. So with that said, let me introduce you to the first of the books I'm going to be reading this month, and I've decided to start with like what I think is like kind of like the least like vibey Halloween-y of them all, but is a vampire book I've wanted to get to for like quite some time. And that is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. So Grady Hendrix is an author that I've read, I think, like 3 other books from so far, and I've enjoyed them all. I started reading, I think I read 2 of his last year around Halloween time, and I had such a great time with them. So I'm kind of banking on this also being like another like fun, campy horror vampire vibes. That's what I'm hoping. What I know about this going in is that it's set in like a 80s or the 90s in like a small Southern American town, and there's a group of women who are all part of a book club when I think somebody like new moves into town to like look after one of their elderly relatives, and when they end up meeting him I think strange things start happening, and I'm pretty sure the implication is that the new guy is a vampire and the women of the book club are going to have to like learn how to deal with a vampire. So I'm anticipating this to be like a fun, quick read. I think it does have the potential, because of the vampires, to be like maybe my new favourite Grady Hendrix book. My current favourite is My Best Friend's Exorcism. So this is going to be my first vampy book of the month, and my plan for today, because as we speak, of course, it is October 1st, and since it's a Sunday, I'm just going to get comfortable in like my nice, fresh, silky gothic bed, light a nice appropriate spooky gothic candle, and just spend most of the day reading this. I tend to be able to get through Grady Hendrix books quite fast, so I'm hoping maybe this is the same, and I will keep checking in with my thoughts and letting you know like how I feel like the vampire vibes are vibing. So yeah, this is going to be my first book, and I will check in to let you know how I get on. So it's October 3rd. I feel like I should be wearing pink, but sadly it's a Tuesday. I am, however, wearing gigantic bat ears, which is actually for part of my Halloween costume if I go out on Halloween. And also these are so adorable. Anyway, okay, they're kind of in frame. So let me give you an update on my reading. So yesterday I finished the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I think I've kind of gone with a 3 stars overall for this. It's definitely not my favourite Grady Hendrix book overall. I kind of pitched all my hopes for liking this one, or potentially being able to like this one the most, on the fact that it was vampires, but as a vampire book, it leans much more into the sort of horror and weirdness of it rather than like the classic vampiness. And I don't want to go into like spoiler territory, but basically it's the kind of vampire in here and like the way that vampires and vampirism exists. And I feel like it is very in keeping with what I would expect from Grady Hendrix and the way he sort of does horror and like reimagines sort of like classic tropes and things. It was something that made a lot of sense. It just didn't really play into like the, I don't know, I like my vampires to be kind of gothic and over the top and like, look at me, you know what kind of vampires I like. So I did find this book thoroughly enjoyable. I still think Grady Hendrix is one of those writers that I'm always going to find really bingeable, easy to read. I read more than half of this the first day and then I just finished it off yesterday. I feel like for me he's becoming a really reliable author. One of the things that I always forget about Grady Hendrix's books in general is just how much anxiety they give me. Like, I have a lot of anxiety, especially like right now, just as like the baseline experience of my life. It's just like the background radiation of my existence. And so often across all of his works that I have read so far is just this, do you know in a book where you will get some sort of, like the characters get incredibly lucky and always like get away at the last second, or they always find like the magical MacGuffin, or like timing's just all time upright, or there's some sort of deus ex machina. Grady Hendrix's books all seem to be the exact opposite of that, and it stresses me out. I know that it's meant to. I know that it's meant to be horror that kind of makes like your gut squirm a bit, because like a lot of it is social and awkward, and then other bits are just kind of like watching a train wreck where it's like you're watching characters do everything wrong and it's just like, you know, just seeing things constantly go awry and like just people not being believed or people not listening or just plans going horribly wrong, whatever kind of nature of things going wrong, it gives me so much anxiety. And part of the reason I probably flew through this was because I was so desperate to get to the end to get some sort of resolution, some sort of catharsis so that I could stop feeling so damn anxious. So yeah, it was a fun read, it was a quick read. I will still be reading more Grady Hendrix in the future. Just unfortunately, even with all the vampire potential, unfortunately not my favourite. You may have seen as well, I also read a couple vampire themed manga. So I don't normally talk about comics or manga on this channel. Personally, I tend to like to keep those separate from like my book reading, but just for the sake of this vlog, I will very quickly tell you about the manga that I've read. The first one is Fangs, and this is by Billy Ballybelly. This is a BL, it is an 18+. There's like a new young fledgling vampire, and he's kind of being introduced to vampire society and like what it means to be a vampire by this other guy who's been a vampire for quite a long time, and you sort of meet some of the other vampires in like their little vampire community, I guess, and it's very heavily romance based and explicit. So it was a fun read. I do have volume 2 on the shelf, but I don't know if I'll get to that this month, maybe, because I don't want to like burn myself out on manga. But the artwork is really nice, so if you like vampires and you like BL, I feel like they're like a genre staple, but I think I would recommend this one. I really like the art. I like the vibe of this one because it's quite modern and new. So that was a fun quick read. It probably took me like, I don't know, maybe like 40 minutes. It's not very long. And actually, surprisingly, my favourite read of the month so far is Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This is a little vampire comic. It's a vampire and a werewolf, and it's like their little dating scenario. It's so cute, it's so fun, it's so funny, it's so relatable if you are goth. I think maybe this may have been a webcomic, but it's being put into this lovely little cloth bound edition and it has black sprayed edges. It's honestly lovely. I've already told my friend that I need to buy her a copy because I know she would love it. If you're looking for such a fun, cute little vampire themed or also werewolf themed like little comic to read at Halloween, I so recommend this. It's so good, it's so funny. I will show you like a couple of like the little comic pages. Like, I just think this is so cute where she's deciding, do I eat this guy or do I date this guy? This one's one of my favourite panels because it's so relatable. Just where she wakes up one morning feeling dramatic and has to dress like this. Yeah, I feel it. I love this. It took me maybe like half an hour to read through. It is very short and very quick, and like sometimes the comics are just like 1 or 2 panels for a page, but honestly this was so fun. I love this. If this author, if this artist puts out anything else similar to this, I will buy it. And honestly I would love a sequel to this. I just love it. It reminds me of when you used to buy Kerrang and used to get like the little comics about, was she called Pandora, the redhead girl, or the Nemi comics. It kind of gives me those vibes, but like a cute werewolf vampire dating scene It's so adorable, it's so funny. I was genuinely amused by things in here. I would give this like a solid 4 stars at least. Like, I don't really rate comics and things here, so this isn't going on like my end of year reading tracking or anything. But this is so far my favourite thing I've read this month, so I love it. Please read it. Okay, well, my camera died, but that's fine because this brings us to my next read for the month anyway. And so I am finally going to be picking up a Dowry of Blood, and this is by S.T. Gibson. So this is the lovely, I think it's the Fairy Loot edition. So this is one that I have been meaning to get to for a little while, but spooky season, and I'm so sure this is going to be so much more gothic and atmospheric and like so much more of what I'm looking for. I kind of want something that feels like, do you know like the 90s Dracula film with the beautiful costumes? That is the vibe I want right now. And I have a feeling that this might go a little way towards that, partly because it is a Dracula retelling. So I believe what I've heard is that this is a reimagining of the story of one of Dracula's brides, and I think it's sapphic. I really don't know much more than that. I imagine it'll at least be set in like Dracula's beautiful gothic castle or something, and there will be vampires, so I am very much looking forward to this one. It's not a very long one either, so I don't anticipate it will be too long before I finish. I do have some other plans for this month as well, despite the fact that there are so many films and like TV shows and things that I want to watch because it's spooky season and I need them all now. I also do want to do some book binding again. I rebound a book earlier this year and it was so much fun. I feel like doing a fun sort of beautiful gothic like Halloween type version might be like just the thing I need to feel creative and also seasonal. That's also something I'm planning to do in between reading this, and so I will let you know how I get on. Hopefully this gives me all the vampire vibes I'm craving. Otherwise I'm gonna get back to work because I'm actually on my lunch break, and if somebody calls me and I look like this, I don't have an excuse. So when you next see me, I probably won't look like this. Hello, so it has been a couple days, but I thought it was about time to check in. I do just want to say, like, right off the bat, I know like the lighting and stuff is going to be weird in this room. It's nearly 1 AM and downstairs filming just is what it is. So I will get to the book in a second, but I did just want to mention, I did get around to rebinding my copy of Crimson Peak, and I think it turned out okay. It's definitely small and cute, and like it has like a little ribbon bookmark, it has black edges, Latin quote on the back because of course, like, it's by no means the best, but I feel like to say I did this by hand in like one evening, like this whole thing, it's not bad. What I will say is I'm so aware at this point that my designs are clearly reaching well above my actual level of skill, but specifically in terms of the equipment I have, I just know that if I want to do a foil this intricate, I did this by hand with a heat pen. Are you kidding? I absolutely need one of those foil printer things because it's just not giving what I wanted it to give. Like, it looks fine, it looks better than the original, like it's cute, it's unique. It was definitely fun to do, like I'm glad that I did it. It's like no one else has one. Like, I like my little design. It's a bunch of like the movie designs mashed together, and I wanted to put a skull and like some stuff on there. So and the font design is also me. So if I can ever afford the actual equipment to do this, like to have a proper like printed foil instead of hand doing this. You can't see what you're doing through the foil because the foil is opaque. We still don't have time, but yeah, if I ever do this again, I think I would go like all out on it. I'd probably get like a higher quality leather. I would put hubs on the spine. I would make this look like an ancient, decrepit, but also glittery foil book. It was a cute little Halloween activity gift to myself though, so I'm happy with it. I did also watch the film. I feel like I liked it better the second time I watched it. I feel like you might have seen a few clips that I've put in of me watching like a few various like little like seasonal flicks. I did also watch Only Lovers Left Alive, which combined with the fact that the Loki season is coming out, I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. I'm not having some sort of like Tom Hiddleston themed month. It was not the intent. The first episode of the new Loki season was so good though. I so don't have time to talk about that here. I refuse to become a Marvel girly. I refuse. With that out of the way, I did finally finish A Dowry in Blood, and look, I thought that this would be so quick. I read like the first over 100 pages, I think, in the first day. I was flying through this and I was thinking like, oh, I'm gonna finish this in 2 days. And then it took me a week because, please don't hate me, I'm so sorry. I just did not want to pick this book up. It was just so not what I wanted. I'm so sorry. I know everyone loves this book. I know everybody loves this book. How do I put this? I don't know whether it's because I am goth all the time and all the media I consume is like a lot more of like this kind of vibe, but better. I don't know. I think part of my issue was I'd heard this described so many times as it basically is a sort of retelling of Dracula's Brides, and it's a lot to do with, it's mainly to do with the relationship, and I knew it would be about an abusive relationship. I knew all this going in, but I just had so thought that it would just have more plot, more tension, whereas this is written retrospectively. It's written as a letter, or like a series of letters from the main character to her vampire husband, who is basically Dracula. His name is never mentioned, but it's heavily implied. So I knew all that going in. I had just expected the vibes to be so different. It's so focused on the relationship, but in a way where I know they're vampires, and I know that them being vampires is what like is keeping them together in this plot. I know that like he's their sire, obviously he's Dracula, and they're like their brides, if you get me. So like I know that that is the setup. I just feel like you could have told this exact same story, just not stretched over like a few hundred years, and just without the vampires, and it really wouldn't have made any difference. And I just wanted it to be so much more. It's not that it doesn't tell a good and worthwhile story about the experience of living in an abusive relationship. I have no complaints about that part whatsoever. I just feel like for a seasonal read, I could have read this at any time of year and it would not have felt any more or less like spooky or seasonal or gothic or atmospheric. I think I'd expected more of more of a romance between the female characters, because I'd heard this described as like a sapphic romance, and like that is part of it, but it's not particularly prominent, and I didn't think it would like occur the way it did. I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but I don't know, I just expected it to be different. If I didn't have ADHD, I feel like I would want to rewrite my own like fanfic version of this, which was what I was expecting, because the version I was expecting I would love to read. It was a decent read. I think I'm gonna give it like a 3 stars because there was nothing wrong about it. I'm just so desperate for a book to feel gothic and atmospheric. I like what it's trying to do. I really like the concept. I just feel like I had different expectations going into this based on what I'd heard from other people. I think if I'd gone into this with no expectations, I might have been like less disappointed by the fact that I was expecting it to get to like this place that it just sort of never got to. Like, it's fine. It's fine. It's probably my fault. I can see why a lot of people like it. It just is not a favourite, and I had so hoped this would be a new favourite, but it just isn't. That does, however, bring me to my next read, and I so almost swapped this out for a different vampire book. I'll be totally honest, this put me, I'm so on the precipice, falling into a reading slump at this point. This book just exhausted me. Like, I really had to push through this, and to say that I read the first like 100 pages in a day so easily, because like I just felt like I was on such a roll, and then it just went downhill. It was so hard to get through like the last like 150 to 200 pages of this. It was a slog. I've gone with it anyway, and I'll explain why. So probably what might end up being my last read, depending on how quick I get through this, but I anticipate this might take me a while, is Vampire Junction by S.P. Somto. I have heard this thrown around that this might also be one of the earliest splatterpunk novels. I do not know how accurate that is, but I would be interested to find out. Yeah, this was one of the vampire books that I hauled that I'm most excited for. The other one I thought about swapping it for was The Golden, which is like the vampire murder mystery one, which I thought would be so fun. So honestly, if I end up flying through this, which is possible, I might pick up The Golden as well. To set the scene for you, his name is Timmy Valentine. He's the biggest rock star in the world. He's a beautiful boy with hypnotic dead eyes and $1 million voice. He's 2,000 years old, and he's a vampire. That's it. That's all I need to know. That is literally all I know about this book. I think I'm excited. I wanted this month to be nothing but vampire vibes, and I feel so burned out. I think that's why I've been watching so much like seasonal media. I'm an absolute slut for a good Halloween film, but like I feel like I've been supplementing everything that I wanted to get from books with film and TV. And so far the books have not been providing. So I'm hoping this one finally gives me what I want. So we'll see what happens. Best laid plans, I don't know. Either way, I'm excited to read some, what I hope will be like actually really good vampire literature. I am crossing my fucking fingers. So with that said, I've got to go. It's 1:05 in the morning. I'm just living on vampire time at this point. But yeah, I'll let you know how I get on with this. Wish me luck. Hello, unplanned update. We're changing books. I'm no longer reading this. I am now instead reading this. Long story short, the beginning, I just wasn't into it. I'll probably still read this at some point. It's not a DNF, it's just it's a not now. So I switched over to this. This I think is set in like a big gothic, like unknowable giant castle, like big fantasy sci-fi looking ass castle with its own weather, and it's a dark, like gruesome vampire murder mystery type thing. I'm praying this gives me the vibes. So I'm switching books. Don't judge me. Hey, so this is not reading related, but I went out to the goth market today. Honestly had a great time. Finally ate some Halloween shaped food. And I just wanted to share my little market haul because it's small and cute. First things first, this is the last thing I got before leaving, and it's just this cute little like fake bottle. The main thing, they had these. They're by a company called Devilwing. They are little like pewter goblets with candles in, and they smell so good. These are genuinely like one of the best smelling candles I've ever had. And this was £5 for the candle and the cup. And so I had to get one for Christmas. This is cinnamon. And it smells so good. And like, I just love how worn and like textured and stained this is. It's so interesting. And it was so cheap for this with a candle in it. I have my new Halloween candle sorted and my Christmas candle sorted, and I'm so pleased about it. And I just wanted to share that because it means that I've finally done something cute and spooky and Halloweeny and seasonal. Today was a success. Hello, so I think this is going to be the last little check-in. Firstly, sorry about the lighting. My overhead light is broken, so I have ring light only. It's actually the only light source in my room, so apologies for that. And like, I also know that I've gotten halfway through like bleaching and dyeing my hair, and then I got lazy, so we're dealing with this. But this month the pipes did burst and flood my house, and the garden tree fell over onto my house. So like, in the grand scheme of things I care about right now, these are just not things that I care about. What I do care about is the books. The first one, which I will very briefly skim through, is Platinum Blood by More Ichigaya. This is a manga, this is another BL manga, and much more explicit, to the point where it's completely uncensored, which I wasn't entirely sure is a thing that Japan can always do with its censorship laws, but apparently in this manga, at least in English, completely uncensored. This one is maybe not quite as easy to recommend as like any of the other comics, mainly because it's more explicit, but also the kind of setup in here is, do you know that thing in Lost Souls where vampires do drink blood, but they can also drink other similar bodily fluids? You see where I'm going? There's a vampire and like his older priest friend who is his food donor, not always in the form of blood. And like, the art style is quite nice, but the thing is, I can't in good faith recommend this. It says on the back that the vampire was brought up at the church at the side of the kindly priest, and I'd kind of assumed that they'd like grown up together. Not the case. It kind of canonically states like the priest is an adult and he meets the vampire as a small child, very small child, and it just casually drops that vampires canonically age at like twice the speed of humans until they reach maturity. And I'm like, so what you're telling me is, if this man has the body of a 22-year-old, that he is 11, and he kind of used this guy as his dad, and all I can think is that TikTok drama about like the hen do and the stag do in Amsterdam. What else do I say? I don't think I have any more words left for that review, so I'm just gonna like move on. So the last book that I actually read, so onto The Golden by Lucius Shepard. I suppose I really quickly want to start out by saying, the reason I DNF'd, oh, it's somewhere, it's so somewhere, I not really DNF'd, but just kind of like soft DNF'd, I guess. Vampire Junction? I kind of really briefly want to say, because I think I was so brief when I checked in last time to say I was not picking it up. The entire first chapter is, again, the vampire looks like 12 years old and he's being hit on by like a very adult reporter who, like, you know, is gonna die, but like it's fine. The point is, it's just like the whole dialogue, no speech marks, no punctuation. It's just enjambment. It just drops a line every time somebody speaks, but there's no indication of whether this is speech, thought, narration, changing character, or just dropping a paragraph. I was not enjoying it. I'm assuming it changes. I'm assuming the rest of the book has speech marks, but like, this was just a long run-on sentences of unmarked dialogue, and it was not vibing with me at that moment in time. So I thought, yeah, screw that, I'm gonna pick up the Vampire Murder Mystery. Also, I thought, because I'm gonna go right off the bat, I was really torn whether or not I was gonna give this like a 4 stars or not, and I think if I'm rounding up, I'm gonna class this as a 4 star. Like, I'm rambling so much. I found this so enjoyable to read, but mainly because of the prose, and it just, it's one of those, I always feel so bitchy and waspy when I say it, but I just think people used to write better than they do now. I just think the bar for being a published author was so much higher in terms of actual linguistic skill. And I do not mean any shade to any actual current authors. Being very utilitarian with your language is also a choice and very accessible, but I also feel like if the medium of your art is language, why are we not allowed to utilize it to the fullest? I don't know how to tell you, but like, when I used to read as a kid, I encountered many words that I did not know, and I looked them up, and now I know them, and now I know loads of words, and I pretty much never have to look at words anymore. And I like that. You learn something new. And I don't know. I really appreciated that this book was just very verbose, which is one of the reasons that I liked it, but why I would not personally recommend it. I will also say this feels very of its time in terms of being a horror, it's quite esoteric, and if you're looking for plot or characters, also not really there. Perfect place for my camera to die. I think what I was saying is that this, if you're looking for things like good plot, good characters, good cohesion, no, this book is very not cohesive, but in terms of atmosphere and prose and just like weirdness, I love it. Vibe-wise, it's not the exact vibe I was looking for, but it's a different vibe that I love whenever I find it because it's so rare. This is like classic gothic vampires, but in that way that's not very romanticized. It's like the horror version of vampires, but sophisticated vampires, loosely and weirdly with cosmic horror and existential horror, and it's weird. It's a weird book, and parts of it are just nonsensical. The setting itself, like, the setting is this giant, impossible structure of a castle called Castle Banat. This place is built to be weird. There are like 1,000-foot staircases that just end midair, and drawbridges across giant vaulted caverns that go nowhere, and there's like no door at the other side, and it rains inside because it's so big, and there are creatures and wildlife living there, like pigeons and wild horses and all sorts of things that just have never seen the outside. And it's like, okay, so this is a weird ass place, and it gives me the vibe of if you are old enough to have played those really unforgiving, like Gauntlet style fantasy dungeon type games. So kind of like the choose your own adventure games, but stuff like Death Trap Dungeon, that kind of thing, where it's just like no place feels safe. There's like no rest place. It's just like this big endless maze of stuff to interact with as like a player character. That is what the setting feels like. It's just everywhere they go, I'm like, this is just some weird new weird shit. Atmosphere wise, great, fantastic, I loved it, and I love the prose so much. But again, I can't recommend this because I know that most people are gonna look at how many words this guy uses to say like one thing, and you're gonna be like, actually no, can I give you an example of just like a typical paragraph? I feel I would be remiss if I did not give you an example of how this was written, so for your benefit, this is 2 sentences. What Beheim had taken for paternal solicitude and noble motive might have merely been the formal dress of a cunning stratagem, and he damned himself for having not recognised that altruism, such as Agenor pretended to espouse, was a virtue alien to the family, that few favours done were not freighted with duplicity, no kindness untainted by greed or some other form of perversity. Agenor's pose of an ancient grown to ruddy wisdom through centuries of academic solitude doubtless masked appetites as feral and conscienceless as those of the Disages. So if that sounds good to you, and you like very pointless, esoteric, dated horror, I would recommend it. To everyone else, I'm so sorry. So I will say, this sets itself up as a vampire murder mystery, and it is that, but it's also not that. Every character pretty much is a vampire, and the setting is entirely divorced from reality because it's set in this big vampire castle. But the thing is, it's not a mystery that you can solve, but also it is the easiest mystery possible to solve. And let me explain. So this doesn't really work as a mystery. I thought this would be written like you are given the ability to, like, you get clues and you meet characters and you sort of, the way a traditional sort of like a mystery would play out, you know, where you can pick up the clues as things go along, and at a certain point you'll have enough to deduce who it is, and then at that point it's just the characters like getting to that point. It does not work like that for 2 reasons. One, there's such a minimal number of characters in here. Of the characters you have, you can rule out very easily all but one person from like very, very, very early on, like super early on, incredibly early in the book. And again, it's so weird, and all the characters have unknowable motives. You can't really pin anything down because these are vampires, they are not humans, and the amount of information that you are given is so minimal and awkwardly timed that you're not really working out a murder mystery. It is kind of always there, it is the driving force for the main character, but you don't get like a whole backlog of clues. Like, there are little clues that you pick up, but again, it's one of those things where you as the reader, you have to be told what that clue is and what it means and what it relates to, because sometimes it's vampire stuff, and it's vampire stuff that's very unique to this world and this world only. It's not a mystery that you, the reader, can work out. If you get meta with it, if you don't let the book be if you're not expecting to solve the mystery, just look at it as a list of characters and be like, well, it can only be this one. And that's, again, that's what kind of book this is. I feel like this was just really interesting because it was such a unique take on vampires, and it was such an inhuman take on vampires from the perspective of a young, kind of fledgling vampire who is transitioning from his basically human counterpart into this more evolved, I guess, vampire form. But I will say though, in terms of things like characters, no. And the ones you meet are kind of not quite caricatures, but they really serve no point or purpose. They're not characters that you can really get to like and know. And I will say, because this was written in the early 90s and it's horror, it's very explicit for a start. It's very sexual throughout the book, and it's because these are vampires, so there will be blood, there will be murder, there will be gore, and there's a lot of sex. But the point about the sex is it's so unequal. It doesn't bother me personally, like I did roll my eyes a few times, but it's so written by a man, it's so written by a man. I would say maybe like 75% of the time you can tell that the thoughts going on in the character's head, it is the character, that is, it's not necessarily the author's viewpoint, because sometimes you get a little contradiction in like the outer narrative that kind of says like, these are the character's thoughts. But I will say, every single female character in here, titties out multiple times, very often, all the time, every chance there is to unshirt a woman, all the time. The main character has sex with like multiple women across this story. Again, it's one of those things where I'm like, well, they are vampires, and they don't feel the same way about sex and romance and relationships as anybody else does, but at the same time these are characters that are being written. But for the most part, if you go into this, you are so going to have to expect that if you meet a female character, you will get a detailed description of her breasts, sometimes in scenes that do not merit the description of an areola, but it's there. It didn't bother me because again, it's one of those things where it is very of its time, and I feel like it is just very common with this genre. It's not that I'm not holding it against the book, but I feel like it was done in a way where it doesn't really detract from my enjoyment of the rest of the book. There are other scenes where like you will get a description of like a naked man, and like sometimes men are naked for no reason as well, but it's not equal. I just feel like that is kind of the state of most novels of this kind of ilk. If I were to pick them up from like, I don't know, anything from like the early 90s and before, I'm like, you know what, it was a wild, lawless place. And sometimes I have to think, in terms of the publishing industry, I mean, maybe some of the feedback you get as an author in those days was, can we put more titties in it? Because this is a lot of like esoteric, verbose bullshit. Can you put some more titties in to keep people entertained? Maybe that was some of his feedback. But yeah, it's not one that I feel like I can recommend to my general audience, but I feel like if you look at this and you think you like it, if you just want to read about some weird vampires with very little plot, very little point to the story, but it's an entertaining, interesting, atmospheric read just for the sake of the words and like the weird lore and mythos surrounding specifically the way vampires are done in this book, then give it a go. I quite liked it. Like I said, I wasn't sure whether to give it a 4 stars or not, or a 3, because books that I've rated 4 stars include The Blade itself, but books that I've rated 3 stars include most of the Throne of Glass books. So I just feel like 5 stars, like, it's not enough wiggle room. So I think I've gone with like a 3.75 on Storygraph or Goodreads or whatever. I enjoyed a good section of this, and I think I was just so relieved to get something that felt gothic and weird and different and atmospheric and like the perfect, I guess, kind of atmospheric read for this time of year. So that did give it a boost. Even though personally I maybe would have cut back on the titties. Or like put some man titties in there to like balance it out a bit more. I didn't get a single description of male areola. What does that say? So yeah, that, let's just put that down. I think I've read less than I had intended to when I thought I would be doing like Halloween time reading come this time of year. I feel like considering all the life things going on as well, 3 books is not bad. Plus what, 2 manga, a comic, and so many vampire movies and TV shows. So I feel like I have successfully had a big October Halloween-y vampire extravaganza. And also, sometimes I have been wearing bat ears because like, is this not just the cutest thing? I can't really do the rest of the video like this though. So yeah, that kind of brings me to like, I guess the end of like my Halloween vlog, which is weird because it hasn't actually been Halloween yet, but if it were Halloween, how would I edit this and upload it before Halloween? I would have liked to have gotten like at least like a 4-star book out of this, considering all vampires. I still think that my favourite thing I read all month was Fangs by Sarah Anderson. I liked it so much that I gave a copy of this comic to my cousin for her birthday, and I did also order one for a really close friend, but Amazon just decided that they were going to send it through Royal Mail for some reason, and then Royal Mail decided they were going to lose it. So, but I feel like when you get something and you want to make everyone else consume that same piece of media, I feel like that's a good sign, right? So my takeaway from this is, if you haven't, read Sarah Anderson's Fangs this Halloween. I know I should say leave like a vampire emoji, but like I want a bat emoji, because like, the bat emoji is so much cuter than like the Hammer Horror big collar at. Like, I don't like that guy. Not my favorite emoji. I like the bat. Give me the bat. So many bats. So I guess let me know what your best read this season has been, whether you read like spooky seasonal Halloween books or not, or if it's just something like autumnal. And with that, I think I'm gonna go like make some pie or something, because I'm from Yorkshire, so like I need gravy to survive. So ultimately, that has been it from me. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. So hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video, and happy Halloween. Bye!